Hey guys, it's Sarah and welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you've been here before. Thank you for returning. Today I want to talk to you guys about a few really unique ways and kind of unconventional ways to land yourself a graphic design job or internship. I had a handful of people asking me about this and DMing me, so I thought I'd make a whole video dedicated to this because I do feel like I have some very unique ways that I've gotten jobs and internships, and I feel like they're kind of a bit unconventional, but I do think they help you to really stand out and get noticed and get a job, and so I want to share those tips with you guys. If you do enjoy the video, I would love for you to like it and subscribe. I make lots of graphic design content, and yeah, there'll be lots more fun stuff coming from me. Also, I do want to say, obviously, I'm like no expert. I think more than anything, I'm still young and new to the graphic design world. I've only been doing it professionally for about 2 years now, but I think I have like quite relatable experiences, and because I'm still young, it's like we're all in this journey together, and I do feel like I have some really valuable knowledge to share with you guys, hopefully. Okay, so I'm gonna break this down into 5 different steps, starting with step number 1, which is research or your job search. So firstly, what most people would think to do, and I think this is a good option, but I think it's important to take it a step further, is most people, I'd assume, would start on places like LinkedIn or I think like Glassdoor, places like that, typical job searching engines and platforms. I will say that's a good start, but please don't stop there. There's more to it than just that. Firstly, I want to say that searching for jobs on places like LinkedIn and stuff like that, those job listings are going to likely have hundreds of applicants, all incredibly talented designers who are competing for that role because it's being promoted to the world. Same with places like Glassdoor or any of those job search engines. So many people are going to be applying to those jobs, and it's incredibly hard to stand out and get that role. So instead of looking on those places, you can ask yourself, well, where do I want to work? Where would be my dream job that I can see like still being somewhat realistic? So first you want to decide where you actually want to work. The thing is, a lot of people don't realize that everyone is always hiring, whether they state it or not, because if you think about it, companies are always looking for incredible talent to take on and join their team, whether they state it publicly or not. So I've gotten jobs where they weren't promoting that they were looking for a designer. They weren't even really looking for a designer at the time, but they hired me anyway because they saw potential and they liked me for whatever reason. I guess, I don't know, they liked me. And so I think you should go for what you want to go for regardless of whether they're hiring or not, because you still have a chance. Even if they don't publicly state they're hiring, they maybe are still hiring and looking for somebody incredibly talented like you. To summarize, look for the job that you want, not for what is being promoted and what's out there. So in terms of where I actually conduct my job searches, obviously you can look like on LinkedIn and other places like that, but I like to start, it kind of depends on whether you're wanting to work in-house or at like a design studio or a design agency. So if you're wanting to work in-house at like, I don't know, Facebook or Google or something like that, you can obviously like look for those roles online and apply to those roles. That's not something I have much experience with because I've never worked in-house, but say you're looking for like a design studio or something like that, I would typically start just by searching on Google Maps, like near you. So I search things like design studio, graphic design, design agency, branding agency, advertising agency, things like that. If you're wanting to work specifically in like packaging design, you can search packaging design on Google. Just search a bunch of different keywords on Google Maps and see what's out there just as a starting point, and write those places down and see what interests you. Another great place is Instagram. I feel like a lot of people wouldn't think to look to Instagram first, but it's actually such a great place for finding design studios that you may want to work at. So a great place is the Design Kids on Instagram. They're great. They actually do post design job listings, which, I mean, it's great to see that as well. Probably have a lot of competition and a lot of people applying for those roles, but regardless, the Design Kids is a good source for looking for jobs. There's also just lots of different Instagram pages that share a bunch of different work from different design studios all around. So Instagram accounts like The Daily Dose of Design, Mind Sparkle Magazine, More Design, Best of Packaging. If you look at any of those Instagram accounts, you're bound to find companies that are being like reshared by them that could be cool and align with your interests, and maybe they're near where you live. And lastly, I would also look towards like award websites. So when I used to work at a design studio, I was living in New Zealand, so I looked at websites like Best Awards, because Best Awards is a New Zealand and Australian based like design award competition, and the studio that I used to work at actually won an award on Best Awards, and that's kind of how I found them, because obviously you want to work at like a really reputable, well-known design studio. I mean, I think most people would. You can also look at Red Dot Awards, Good Design Awards, just different award companies, like especially in your local area, in your city. If you can find design award websites, then you can kind of do your job search on there as well. So after you've done kind of like a Google deep dive and you've found a few companies that you'd like, I'd start with just a few at a time. Don't start mass emailing a bunch of companies. That's not what you want to do. Just start with maybe like your top 3, 4, 5 companies. And what you want to do is you want to really know the ins and outs of the company, research them thoroughly, because that will come into play later. You need to make sure you do your research on your company that you're applying to. Yeah, you just want to do research. So just keep it narrow right now and just do research on a few companies, like 5 max. So step number 2 is to make sure your portfolio and your CV or resume or whatever you want to call it is prepared. I feel like I could do like an entire video on all of this because there's so much that goes into it, but obviously I'm not gonna do a whole video on that right now. I'm just gonna go over it briefly, but we'll start with your portfolio. So if you can, from what I've been told in the design world by my peers and coworkers and things like that and professors, and I definitely agree with this, is to have a website portfolio as opposed to like a PDF portfolio or even like a tangible portfolio, because websites are just so much more practical and easy to like share around. If you have like a brief interaction with a potential employer at like a networking event or something like that, you can't really just say, oh, I'll forward you my PDF portfolio, because it's just a bit of a hassle and they might forget about you. And I just think websites are just so much easier and convenient. And nowadays with like Squarespace and things like that, it's super easy to make a simple website. So I definitely recommend, if you can and if you have the time, make a website as opposed to a PDF portfolio. I'd also say keep your website pretty clean and straightforward. So Squarespace is great for that because they have like really simple, straightforward templates. You kind of want your work to do the talking, not the UX or UI to kind of be difficult to navigate and then it interferes with the work itself. So just keep it simple with an online portfolio like Squarespace. In terms of the work itself, like the content in your portfolio, I'd say anywhere from like 6 to 10 case studies is good. Any more than that, and I just don't think people will look through it all, and any less than that, and it doesn't show maybe as much variety. So yeah, I'd fill your portfolio with about like 7 to 10 case studies. I think that's like a nice range. I've also been told by professors, and I don't agree with this, they've told us, and I remember this many times, they told us to have real world projects in our portfolio. But for one thing, a lot of us, especially if you're applying to internships, you may not even have any real world experience at that point. Like all your work in your portfolio may just be imaginary case studies and stuff. So first of all, you might not even have real world work to put in there. And if you do, odds are, if you're like a newer junior designer, it's probably gonna be really boring, like internship work that you've done. I know for me, that was the case with my real world, that's hard to say, my real world work at the time was very boring and not fun at all. And to be honest, like employers couldn't care less about that kind of work. They want to see what you're capable of and what you're best at and what you're passionate about. It does not matter if your work is real or not, because if they're gonna hire you, the work is going to be real because you'll be working at a real company. And I just haven't had anybody show any interest in my real world projects. They've only cared about my like imaginary projects because they're more fun anyway, and it shows what you're good at and what your specialty is. So yeah, I don't bother with the real world projects that you've done unless obviously you're proud of them and it was a really cool project that you collaborated on and the results came out really beautifully. Then obviously put that in your portfolio. But otherwise, I don't think you should feel obligated to put these real world projects in, especially if they're just gonna weaken your portfolio. I also want to say, back to the if you're at networking events and giving out your website URL, a business card is a great way to do that easily. I feel like business cards are really underrated nowadays, and a lot of people say like not to bother with them, but I think it kind of shows that attention to detail and that you're taking the steps to get a job and to network, and you're just taking those extra steps, because not a lot of people and a lot of students or young designers have business cards. So it just, in any way that you can go beyond what your peers are doing is the best way to do it. So just make a little business card if you can with your name and your URL. It doesn't need to be fancy or anything, but it's definitely really convenient for potential employers, and it'll make you more memorable as well. And then in terms of your CV or resume or whatever you want to call it, I feel like this is kind of a controversial topic as to like how you want to design it. For me, I feel like I like to keep the clean and simple format, kind of what's industry standard, as opposed to like making it all fruity and colorful and nicely designed, just because I feel like your portfolio is where you show your design skills and your CV is where it's more informational. To play it safe, I just keep it very practical. I don't know, my CVs have been successful in getting me jobs, so that's just what I stick with. There's lots of like YouTube videos I'm sure you can watch much on how to like format your CV correctly and make it as like effective as possible. So I don't have too many tips on that, but I would just keep it very practical and don't go over the top with like designing it and stuff like that. That is more for your portfolio, in my opinion. So step number 3 is kind of the scary part, but also the most important part, and that is reaching out and first impressions. So once you have your portfolio set up and your CV set up and you've done all your research on a few companies that you really like, you can reach out one of 2 ways. You can reach out the safe way or the brave way. And I've done both, and both have worked for me in different scenarios, and they're both really effective. So I'll walk you through both, but first I'm gonna start with the safe way. So essentially the safe way for applying for a job or internship is to email them. And I know you're probably thinking like, Sarah, okay, everybody knows you need to email them. Like that's not like profound or anything like that. But my trick is what you ask them in the email. So I think a lot of people think I'm gonna ask them for a job or if they're hiring. And the thing with that, no matter how beautifully crafted that email is and how much research you've done into them, and you're like, I admire the work you do for X, Y, and Z project. I aspire to do something like that when I graduate. And you know, like no matter how beautifully crafted that email is, if you're asking for a job, they're likely to say no or just not reply, because like, and I know this from experience because I worked at a design studio and our creative director would get emails constantly from people asking for jobs and stuff like that. And I don't know if he replied. I think he like would just disregard them because he got so many. It's like you can't reply to them all. It's just so easy to say, oh no, we're not hiring. Even if you are, it's just so easy to decline something like that. And you need to make a good impression first before you start asking things of people. So instead of asking them for a job, you want to ask them something that is hard to say no to or is kind of enticing to them. So one thing you can do that has worked for me and has worked for other people that I know is to email them asking them for a tour of their studio. If you're a student, this is really great because you can say, I'm a graphic design student in my 3rd year of university. I love what you guys do and I aspire to be like you guys when I graduate in November or whatever. Would it be possible to have a tour of your studio and kind of learn the ins and outs of how you guys operate, how such a successful branding and packaging design company operates? I would love to know the ins and outs of it because I will be hopefully in a position like that in a few months' time. So I'll actually put an email here, like an email format of how I would word this, asking to have a tour of a design studio. So this is what I would say. You can pause it here. So yeah, I'd say something like that. I think the thing with this, as opposed to asking for a job, it's a lot harder to say no to. It's kind of messed up if you don't reply or say no. And it's easy for an employer to do that. Like it's not as huge of an ask as an interview is. And the thing with asking for a tour of the studio is if they say yes and you do go and tour the studio, that is your time to shine and like make all the great first impressions, because it's so easy to make a good first impression in person versus like over email. You can be very forgettable over email if somebody hasn't seen your face yet, whereas in person, if you're talking to them one-on-one ideally, like that is such a great opportunity to be able to have that turn into suddenly an informal interview, or at the very least it's great for networking. I did something similar to this. I did something slightly different, but I'll tell you guys what I did. And this is how I landed a graphic design role as a full-time junior designer before I had even graduated university. So I was working on a project, my final uni assignment. It was a semester long. I was working on a branding and packaging project for a chocolate brand that I was designing. And so I had this company in mind that I really, really wanted to work at. They were like an award-winning company. And I was like, I just think I would fit perfectly in there and I love what they do. So I was like, how can I kind of talk to the creative manager and try to wiggle my way in and get a job at this company? So I emailed the creative director and I basically said, hey, I love what you guys do. I aspire to be like you guys when I graduate and work at a company like this when I graduate. I'm currently working on my final uni assignment where I'm branding and designing packaging design for a vegan chocolate brand. And I love what you guys do and I think you're incredibly talented and you're experts in this field. So would it be at all possible to have a quick chat sometime over my project and get your input and critique and things like that and your advice, given that you are an expert in this field? So I'll insert my email that I wrote here. I sent this email. Also, when you send emails, I'm very like particular on when I send emails, and I think you should be too. So when I send emails, I send them ideally Tuesday or Wednesday at 7:30 a.m. Monday, people are grumpy. They're probably not going to want to reply to your email, or they're just not going to be interested. And then Thursday and Friday, in my opinion, are too close to the weekend. So if they don't reply right away and it rolls into the weekend, then by the time Monday comes back around, your email is going to be way at the bottom of their inbox, such low priority. At that point, they're not going to reply. Like, it's such a slim chance that they'll reply. So I would send the email Tuesday or Wednesday, 7:30 a.m. so it's in the top of their inbox. You'll have much higher chances, I think, of getting a reply. And that's what I did. And I got a reply within like half an hour. And the creative director was like, that sounds great. That's really awesome. Can you come in an hour? And so of course I was panicking. I was like, oh my gosh, I did not expect this at all. But of course I said yes. I came in an hour and met with him. We started talking about my university assignment. One thing led to another. Suddenly I was in an informal interview, and then I got the job. I think that's the best way to do it, like not a conventional route, not going through HR and all of that. If you can. If you can think of any ways you can stand out and get your way in there and have that first impression and that interaction with them, once you've done that, that's the hardest part. And after that, hopefully it'll just be smooth sailing, because if you can just get that interaction with a creative director, you suddenly like have such high chances of getting the job, as opposed to like it just staying in the emails. So essentially the safe way is you want to reach out to creative directors via email, give a little bit of a blurb about why you like the company, show you've done your research, keep it short and sweet though. Don't ask for a job in the first email. Either ask for a tour of their space, ask for advice on a uni assignment, or something along those lines. Something unique that is hard to say no to, then you're on your way. So yeah, that's the safe way. If the safe way doesn't work, then you've got another option, which is the brave way. I think this maybe is like a bit controversial as to if people would like this approach or people wouldn't like this approach, but this approach worked for me, and I got a job within like a day of doing, or it was an internship. I got like an internship within a day of doing this like brave way. So the brave way is exactly that. You have to be a bit brave to do it, and it's very scary to do, but the brave way is to essentially do your research on the company and then find where they're located, and then just arrive at the place and ask them, hey, I love what you guys do. I'm a graphic designer student, or whatever you are. I love what you guys do. Would it be at all possible to have a brief chat with the creative director or set up a meeting with him to learn more about the company? I love what you guys do. And that's a great way to do it, because you're getting that face-to-face interaction right away, and they're seeing that you're like a normal person, you're being very ambitious and brave, you're taking that extra step to show I really want to work here and I really am passionate about this. And nobody does that. Like, I don't know of anybody that does that. Actually, I have heard of people doing that and they've gotten jobs that way, but I think it's pretty uncommon for people to do that, and that's why it's so effective. So what I did is I was looking for my first internship, and I knew it was going to be so hard because I had no experience. My portfolio was like atrocious. It was so ugly. Like, there was no way I was going to get a job just from emailing people. And no matter how beautifully crafted my emails were, I just knew that I wasn't going to get an internship that way. So our university sent everybody an email out, like a mass email to all the design students, saying that this design company was looking for an intern, and like email them and send your portfolio over to them. So I emailed them. Even then I knew, I was like, I don't think they're gonna reply, because this was a mass email that was sent out to like all the design students. So all these kids are gonna be wanting to apply to this internship. And so I just felt like there was just no chance that they were gonna email me back. So I was like, what can I do to stand out? And so I did a bit of research on the company, obviously, so I knew what I was getting myself into and could talk about them. And then I just went to the design studio. I was like, I want to talk to the creative director regarding an internship role that they're hiring for. And so the creative director came over and we started talking, and I was saying, I'm really interested in the role. I would love to work for them, and I think I'd be a great fit and things like that. And basically he was like, nobody's come in to do this. And he's like, you're definitely on the top of the list now. And so like 2 days later I had the internship and I started working there like 2 days later. And I think especially with internships, I don't think they care as much about experience. I think they just care about your ambition, because at the end of the day, the tasks you're doing at internships usually don't require a lot of skill. I feel like, at least for mine, as long as you're like dedicated and disciplined and things like that. So I think that's more what they were concerned about. And I think that's the case with a lot of these internships. So don't fear if your portfolio doesn't seem up to par, or even your CV. Trust me, if you like are a normal person, like okay with a social interaction. I know I was really scared. I get a lot of social anxiety, and it's normal if you're like doing these kind of like informal interview interactions. But regardless, it's really effective, and it worked for me, and I know it's worked for other people as well. just going in and talking to them, and it's just so effective, and I definitely recommend doing that. And I will say, I think it's controversial in the sense that maybe you're inconveniencing them, and if they're very busy and they have important meetings, maybe come back another time. But I think sometimes it's good to put people on the spot and put them in this position where they just need to talk to you really quick, and then they'll realize, oh, actually she's pretty cool, maybe she would be good for this role. It doesn't hurt to just try. I've found it to be really effective, and I highly recommend this step if the emailing doesn't work. Also, I will say with the Brave way, it works better if you know that they are for a fact hiring, because then you go in there with like a goal, and that is to inquire about that position. However, if you don't know if they're hiring, you could just simply ask for a tour. Again, you could say, I'm currently a design student in university, or whatever your position may be, and just be like, I love what you guys do, and I'd love to work at a design studio like this in the future. Would it be possible to have a tour? Or you could even set up a meeting to have a tour if this time is inconvenient for you. I'd just love to learn the ins and outs of your company. So something like that. I don't know. I'm not the best at like, this is just my stream of consciousness. You'd want to craft your words a little bit more carefully than what I'm saying right now. But even if you stumble on your words, it's not a big deal. They understand. So step 4 is the interview or interaction. It's different kind of depending on what the process you took is, but if they did schedule you for a formal interview, here are a few tips for that. So if you aren't the best at speaking, which I feel like a lot of us aren't, I mean, it's normal to get stage fright and stuff like that. If you aren't the best at that, I would say practice with a friend some interview questions. I feel like that's kind of common knowledge, but I swear it helps so much. So play them being the interviewer or the employer and you the interviewee. Is that the term? I don't know. You play yourself essentially. And your friend will ask you some questions, and then you answer them just as candidly as you can possibly, and then you can discuss after how you could improve those answers. And then what I also like to do is flip the roles, so they actually play you and then you play the interviewer, because sometimes it's good to hear how other people would answer for you, and then you can go, oh, I actually like the way you worded that, maybe I'll say it more like that in the actual interview. I mean, obviously you don't know what the questions are going to be exactly, but it just helps to build your confidence so much. I swear by this, and it's such good practice. Even if you are good at speaking, I just think it's such good practice regardless. And then when it comes time to the actual interview, I wouldn't be too scripted though. Even though you've practiced those questions, I think it's best to be a little bit candid and don't come in with like a very set script, because people just want to see your personality shine through and see that you're like a normal person and can talk about yourself. Also, there's like lots of good YouTube videos on like interview prep and things like that. But I think the best tip I can give is just to be yourself and be natural. It's okay to be a bit nervous, because I've always been nervous in my interviews. My voice has always cracked, and I feel like they've been able to see through that, but I've still gotten jobs and internships. So I think you'll be fine. Be confident, and I'm sure it will be okay. So step 5 is the final step to the process, and that is following up and moving forward. So right after you meet with them, whether you do the Brave way and you walk in, or you've had an interview with them, once you get back home in maybe like an hour after, I would send a follow-up email saying thank you for their time, and just keep it really brief, showing your gratitude for their time, just saying I hope to hear back from you soon, I appreciate your time and all the knowledge you shared, or whatever. Cater it a bit towards that experience so it doesn't sound super generic. But yeah, just send up a follow-up email, because that kind of reinforces to them your interest. And then after that, if you haven't heard from them in maybe 5 days, I would say, send a follow-up email just touching base. Something like this would work great. You can pause it. And then after that, if you still haven't heard back, I think it's safe to say that you weren't chosen for this role, or they're not hiring or not interested or whatever. And don't worry, a lot of people just don't reply. Like, they get these emails constantly, and whatever way you can kind of stand out, I would do that. Even if it's scary, I would just do it. It doesn't hurt to try. As cheesy as it is, it's better to say, oh well, than what if. So at the end of the day, don't be too hard on yourself. Don't stress. It will all happen in the right time. A bit of patience. Job searches are incredibly stressful and scary and competitive. Odds are it's nothing to do with like your skill level and your abilities. It's just that it's just hard to find a design job nowadays. Just be patient with yourself, but be diligent and keep up with it. Don't get discouraged, because sometimes it doesn't work out at the start. But trust me, if you have patience and you're consistent with your job searches and follow these steps to really be unique and stand out, you will get there eventually. So that's all the tips I have for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please feel free to share your tips as well in the comments. I'm kind of just speaking from experience and how I got my jobs. I do find these tips to be quite successful and quite unique as well. So definitely try them out. Let me know how you go, and please share your tips in the comments if you have any other tips. I love reading your guys' comments. And again, if you did enjoy, I would love for you to subscribe. I make lots of like graphic design content, and I plan to be making lots more in the future. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Good luck on your job search, and I'll see you next time.